All right, so we're on to the next video in our series. We're just going to talk about the filter section today, so a little shorter video. We have 3 knobs and 3 toggles that we're going to be talking about. The first one is probably the most important, the cutoff knob. Now, if you don't know anything about how a sound works, we say we're playing the note A or we're playing the note F, but there's more to the sound than simply one single pitch. If we were playing a sine wave, that sound only has one frequency that exists within it. But when we play something like a sawtooth wave or a square wave, or pretty much any natural sound, there are many, many frequencies occurring within that sound at different volumes. So the one that's the loudest, and usually the lowest, is the one that we assign the name the pitch. But there are many other sounds occurring. And so you can do any kind of Google search for a spectrum chart, type in oboe sound spectrum, and you'll see an image that looks like a mountain range slowly falling away from left to right. And what that little range is showing you is a range of frequencies that are existing within that sound. And what our cutoff knob does is it selects a frequency from within a sound. So right now I have this knob turned all the way up. This is selecting the highest frequency that the synthesizer can select. If I lower this to about halfway, now it is pointing to a frequency halfway within its frequency range. Now you can see that it did something to the sound, but we're going to talk about that in a second. If I turn it all the way down, now it's pointing at the lowest frequency that it can, and you're not hearing anything. But that is not a function of this knob. This knob merely selects frequency ranges within selects a frequency. Now, the knob below it, the toggle switch, sorry I keep doing that, this is what selects the range. On this side it says low, and what this means is low pass. So if I have that here, and I put this here, this means that any frequencies lower than this selection will pass through and we will hear it. So this is selecting a frequency somewhere in the middle, and we're only hearing the frequencies below that passing through. If I were to switch this to high, you would only hear the frequencies above that passing through. And now the lower ones are missing. If I turn this all the way up and set it to low pass, everything below it is passing through. If I set this to high pass, very little sound is coming through, just what exists higher than the cutoff frequency. And if I turn this all the way down, but it's set to high, we hear the entire sound again, because we've selected a very low frequency and we're saying everything higher than it can pass through. So let's go back to low mode. And let's start about here. And we're going to do one of the most common things. This is a filter sweep. And of course that action we talked about before, when we talked about the oscillator section, we can turn that knob using the LFO, the low frequency oscillator. And so if I turn the cutoff to about here, and I set my VCF mod, this is how much I'm letting the LFO change this, and I turn this up. That would be the exact same thing as me going which is annoying and not very elegant. If we set this to a small amount and we turn our LFO up, it would be me like going. So this knob is like, how much are you going to rotate from the starting position? And this knob is, how fast are you going to do that? So a really low LFO and a low VCF mod. Would be me going like this. The next knob here is the resonance knob. And what this does is it takes whatever frequency has been selected by this and it increases its volume. So right now I'm taking a frequency about the middle of my sound. And as I play, as I hold this pitch, I'm going to turn up the resonance and you're going to hear one pitch kind of start to poke out. So you should be hearing and then those things start happening. And now, with this about here, if I turn the cutoff knob, you'll hear that higher note move. So it's getting higher. And so this shows you that this is pointing to a specific frequency. Now combine that with the LFO and you get the classic filter sweep. This is modulating this knob still, but we're hearing the effect of kind of where that white spot is pointing move, because the resonance knob is bringing it out for us to hear. If I turn this down, it starts lower and it doesn't go as high. If I turn this up, it goes wider and wider. And then of course you want to turn everything up as high as you can and see what happens. The more you do things like this, you'll start to recognize sounds from your favorite science fiction movies. I'm pretty sure this is a sound of a transporter in one of the Star Trek movies. Something in Star Trek 2. Or maybe this is how they made the, if you know Star Trek 2, the sound effects to the Genesis video that Carol Marcus makes, you might use something similar to that in this. So anyway, great science fiction-y type sound. Now another thing that I was saying, you'll notice that as I turn this up, it adds to the frequency. And that's because this mod is set to positive. And so its lowest value is this. If I set it to negative, with the LFO it doesn't make much difference because the LFO is a positive and negative wave. When this positive versus negative thing becomes more important is when we use the envelope section, which we'll talk about in our next video. So we're going to save the actual function of the positive and negative polarity in the filter section for the next video. Okay, I hope that little explanation was helpful. And in our next one, we'll talk about the envelope and we'll talk a little bit more about the LFO and then how the envelope can be used not only to modulate frequency or pulse width like we talked about 2 videos ago, or frequency like we talked about today, but it's also incredibly important for the actual volume of your tones as you play them. Okay, see you in the next one.